There are people in certain communities that don't have electricity. If they have electricity, they don't have water and a lot of good amenities. The only decent thing they have is the land from which they can get earn their livelihood. So if that land is destroyed, where will they be?
Hello, everyone. We're at the Media Foundation for West Africa, and we're just about to speak to a nationally renowned journalist, Manasseh Azure, about the latest scandal to rock the nation, and also about the involvement of a very well known politician, Sir John. Manasseh, this scandal that has rocked the nation involves a will that was left by the famous politician Sir John. Are you the one who unearthed this information? Can you put the whole thing in context?
I think the issue of Sir John's will became a matter of public interest because of the involvement of Achimota lands. And when the land issue came up, I was one of those who were very vociferous on social media about the fact that I have traveled a bit to other countries and continents, and I see how green it is. Even Nigeria, if you go to Abuja, their roads are lined with trees. Go to Johannesburg and you love it. I've been to a number of cities, at least 5 states in the US and a number of cities in Germany. I've been to Indonesia and a few other places, and I see how beautiful it is. So when I realized that or saw the news that Achimota Forest was to become another concrete jungle, I took interest in it. But the government and its communication machinery acted very swiftly. They came out to deny any wrongdoing. It wasn't going to be sold. It was supposed to go strictly to the family that owned it and all of that. And that also raised questions. People who knew about this issue said, look, there are specific portions of the land that was supposed to go to the family, but it seems you are giving more than what had been agreed on before you even came into office. So when I saw a piece of, I think it was a one pager going around about the fact that, look, Sir John, or Kojo Owusu-Efrie, who was chairman of the Forestry Commission until his death in July 2020, had some interest at Achimota Forest, I decided to probe further. First, to authenticate the document. It was just one-page document which could easily be faked. I do investigations, so I have come to realize some documents that look real can end up being faked. So that was what led me to start probing. And not only did I find out that that piece of paper, one-page document was authentic, I also got the entire will of Sir John. And so we here at the Fourth Estate decided to publish it due to the overriding public interest considerations on the matter.
So, but that doesn't end the story because the government came back very forcefully just to say that they had investigated, that's the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, to say that they had looked into the records at the Lands Commission and that there was no record of Sir John owning any property in Achimota or a Ramsar site, Sakumonu Ramsar site. But still, they're saying that they will ensure that nothing is taken from Achimota Forest that is not part of the the edict that the president issued recently. What's your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is still that we should be vigilant as a people because nobody expected the government to come out and concede that in fact Sir John had land there. And if that concession is made, it would lead to a number of questions. If Sir John has land there or had land, and that amount of land so huge, I think the two that were named, I think were 5.4 and then some others. So if you put all together, it's close to close to 7 acres. But there were, yes,
7 hectares.
Acres of land. But there were two others in the will that if you look at it, the size of the land is not stated in the will. So if Sir John alone had that amount of land, then the question would be who else and what is the size of their ownership, because there are people obviously in the government or linked to the government who are more powerful than he was. So nobody expected the government to come out and say, look, what is there is true. Now with the Lands Commission, it's one of the most opaque state institutions here. Some actually call the Lands Commission a crime scene. So it's very difficult for such an organization which the government controls to say otherwise. But even granted that they are telling the truth, it may not be strange that the Lands Commission will do a search and not find the name Kwadwo Usu-Efrie owning any piece of land at Achimota Forest or the Ramsar site. What he did, and it is quite obvious in the will, that there's something we call beneficial ownership. Here we don't really have that transparency. It is still being pushed that we get a beneficial owners register. But per my investigation, sometimes people in public office don't acquire the assets in their name. So if you look at the will of Sir John, he will say, I own a land at Achimota Forest in the name of this. I own another in the name of. Then I own one together with this person. So you don't necessarily have to see Kwadwo Usu-Efrie in the documents of the Lands Commission to be able to know that he owned land there. Some of the companies and even the gold mining businesses he had, because he was the CEO of the Forestry Commission, and perhaps they had to give permission for others to go into the forest and other places to mine, he could obviously be conflicted. So if you look at the will, he said, I have this interest in the gold production business. Contact this person on phone number, this. All of that provided. If everything was done in his name, he wouldn't have to go to that extent. So this is what the Lands Commission is saying. This is what the government is saying. But I have a feeling that they do not necessarily have to see his name to be able to link him to these lands. From what is contained in his will, there was some attempt to delink him directly from the ownership, perhaps because the position he held and some of the things that were happening obviously put him in a situation of conflict of interest. And so any half-witted person in that position would want to take steps to distance himself. When I investigated a contract for sale involving a PPA CEO, I realized that he tried to hide the registration. Even though he used his name, he took the middle name out. And so, Ejenim Boateng Ejay. So if you see Ejenim Ejay, anybody at all could be an Ejenim Ejay. But what really made me link him to the business was a funeral poster. There was a funeral in the eastern region. His brother had died. So that funeral poster had a name that was connected to the wife and also the brother-in-law, all of those three names. So I was able to get a triangle surrounding the TDL group. So I'm very familiar with how public officers, officials, try as much as possible to distance themselves from the companies and wealth and properties they own while in office. And so this may just be one of such.
How were you able to verify that the will actually was that of Sir John?
Well, for journalists, sometimes we aren't able to disclose our sources, but I was able to speak to a number of people who confirmed that this was indeed Sir John's will. Fortunately for me, when he died, a discussion came up, and then someone pointed to one of the properties. That is a Sir John's property. It is a building which is uncompleted. So when I saw the will, I decided to go through that list. And in fact, the description fits what I saw. So I said, well, this had some level of authenticity. So I contacted a number of people and also the prior knowledge of at least one of the properties. And some of the associates, some of the names mentioned in the will are very close. And there was also some bit of controversy surrounding the will. So I went online to read. And so you could see a lot of dots connected. So I was convinced that this was an authentic document. And it's been more than 24 hours since this story came out. And if this wasn't true, at least they would have gone all out to deny it. But this is a court document.
So, what is the national importance of this? It has to do with definitely the depletion of our forests
Yes.
in Accra and throughout the country. Massive percentage of forests have been lost. And this, the issue of this Sir John's will, doesn't it fix the whole issue around party political animus, thereby obscuring the bigger issue that we're not able as a nation to protect our forests?
Yes, it does, but it also lifts the veil on some of the dealings. But for this will, the government was almost going to get away with it. The government and its communicators and social media gangs had started attacking, insulting, and discrediting people who raised suspicions about the Achimota Forest deal. This will showing us that a politician in the governing party had some interest or had some portions of the land, at least convince the average reasonable person that if this is true, then there could be something more than the government is telling us. And with this and other mining and other activities, you'd realize that we often have politically exposed persons who have power and the backing of the states, especially when there are parties in office to perpetuate this. There was a time Asantehene made a comment. There was a program, and he said Lands and Natural Resources Minister visited him and told him what to say. But there was one thing he wanted to say, he made it public. And he said that those who were involved in illegal mining and all of creating all of those problems were known. Everybody knew them. And I don't think the Asantehene, a very respected chief who presides over a large area of the mining enclave of this country, would just be saying it. He knew what he was talking about, and he wasn't obviously talking about the unfortunate young men or women who get themselves dirtied in there. He was talking about the people behind some of the most atrocious attack on our environment. So it is true that the discussion is narrowing on Sir John, but it is also true that it gives us a sense of how these things happen. Those of us who had suspicion that politicians may be having lands in a Chimota forest, that suspicion has been confirmed. Those of us who have always had suspicions that the Ramsar sites and other protected areas are being desecrated, mainly because some powerful people are behind it, those suspicions have been confirmed. So I think this will and its discussion have rather helped the conversation. It rather opens things up and calls for greater scrutiny and accountability, because just this afternoon we at the Fourth Estate published an angle of the story that reveals that he didn't even declare his assets while in office. And the question is, how many more people in such position of power did not declare their assets when they were supposed to do so.
Occupy Ghana has issued a statement calling for the suspension of the declassification by the Office of the President of a portion of Achimota Forest. Do you support that, or do you think that it's too late?
It isn't too late if we have a very honest political system that takes decision in the interest of the people. It will be too late if we have too many politicians and people of power who have acquired lands at Achimota Forest, and letting it go will hurt their interest more than the interest of the state. So I don't think it is too late if we had a president who was very committed to ensuring the right thing being done. And this process actually started in the NDC era, except that there are concerns that the amount of land that was ceded is now being exceeded, if I should put it so. So there is a suspicion that the difference is going to the politicians. But I won't be surprised that if you go into this, you would realize that NDC politicians and MPP politicians may have a lot of vested interest here. So the kind of push and advocacy that should go into such a call for a reverse of what the president has done would not be strong enough, because when it comes to personal and parochial interests, I often say that the NDC and MPP are like Siamese twins.
So, in the end, then, what can be done, in your personal view? What should be done to protect our forests and our trees?
What can be done? Two things. One, we the people should get more serious and put our political party lines aside and think about our collective interest. Politicians have their interests. There are only a very few of them who go there thinking about the national interest. But sometimes they're also crippled by the difficulties in speaking up when everyone else is against the right thing in the collective interest of their party or their personal interest. So we, the people, have to get more serious and realize that when it gets critical, when the environment is depleted, when we have the flooding and other attacks from the repercussions of climate change, it is us who are going to suffer more. The average politician is able to ensure or immunize themselves against any of the problems that we suffer. They're able to buy property in prime areas that are hardly affected by floods. When things get tough, some have stolen enough to secure generations. But the average person, if crops fail in a year, their lives that are going to be ruined. So we should take into account these considerations and press for our interests whenever these issues come up. I also think that the chiefs have a very important role to play, and politicians don't want to offend the chiefs, whether NDC, MPP. None of them would want to offend Asantehene. None of them would want to offend Ochehene. None of them would want to go to Doma and offend the Domahene, knowing that if they disrespect the Domahene, he may mobilize his people against them, or the people on their own would rise against that political party. It's the reason sometimes they go to beg when people say certain things against the chiefs. So the chiefs should let their power be felt when it has to do with protecting the environment. I sincerely think that if Asantehene gets very tough with the political actors, they will respect him. They respect him a lot. There's no two ways about it. They respect him a lot. And if he tells a particular DC that, look, your place is being devastated by illegal mining, you have to stop it, I think the DC will listen to the Asantehene more than a civil society advocate. So I think the chiefs, they are concerned, they are doing something, but I think they should do more if the environment to be saved. Sometimes I don't think it makes sense for you to allow people to invade your village. You go to the villages, and the people destroying the water bodies are sometimes not from that village. You find people from the north, from the Volta region, from all parts of the country, descending on a village in Ashanti region or the eastern region or the western region. And when they destroy the water bodies and everything and they eventually leave, the question is, what will be the fate of the people in that village? And all these villages have chiefs. So they should all stand up and say no to the destruction of the environment, because if for nothing at all, we are not able to produce much, we don't invent a lot of things, we import almost everything. But the land is what we depend on when things get tough. There are people in certain communities that don't have electricity. If they have electricity, they don't have water and a lot of good amenities. The only decent thing they have is the land from which they can get earn their livelihood. So if that land is destroyed, where will they be? So if people begin to think this way, they wouldn't act as accomplices for powerful businesses and politicians and even Chinese who come to destroy the forest. Because when we lose that, then we become very miserable. We don't have water to drink, and this is not a country that should be struggling with water. There are countries that are so advanced that they can import water and then get technologies over hundreds of kilometers to get water to their people. We don't have that. And so if you allow the various water supplies that feed our water systems to get destroyed, one can imagine how costly it will be. There's certain politicians who can buy mineral water or bottled water for everything for the rest of their lives. But what about the average Ghanaian who can hardly afford to even buy water from a Ghana Water Company?
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
And that brings us to the end of this edition. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to our channel. Join us next week.